All right, let's talk about one of the most legendary matchups of World War II, the German Panzer IV squaring off against the American M4 Sherman. Now, this was way more than just a tank-on-tank duel. It was really a clash of two totally different philosophies, and the outcome, well, it would go on to shape the entire war in Europe. So here's the big question, right? In a straight-up, one-on-one tank battle, who actually wins? It's something tank enthusiasts have been arguing about for decades. But back in the summer of 1944, this wasn't some friendly debate. The answer was literally a matter of life and death, and it had the power to decide the outcome of the whole war. Let's set the scene. It's Normandy, June 1944. We're just weeks past the D-Day landings, and honestly, the whole invasion is hanging by a thread. The Allies are really struggling to push inland from the beaches, and all the while, German armored units are throwing everything they have at them, desperately trying to shove them right back into the sea. I mean, the stakes, they just couldn't get any higher. So yeah, Normandy's steel duel. This incredibly tense moment is what sets the stage for a really brutal clash between the two most common medium tanks you'd find in this campaign. And we're not talking about some rare one-off encounter. No way. This was the daily, bloody grind of the war in Normandy.
Okay, so let's meet our contenders. In one corner, you've got the Panzer IV, the absolute workhorse of the German army. Now, it was an older design for sure, but they were constantly upgrading it, which made it incredibly potent and feared by Allied crews. And in the other corner, the M4 Sherman. It was reliable, it was cheap to build, and it was the undisputed backbone of the Allied armored forces. Both tanks had a 5-man crew, and, if you just looked at the stats on paper, they seemed pretty evenly matched.
All right, let's get into the tale of the tape, starting with armor. I mean, it's the most basic question in any tank duel, isn't it? How well can these things actually take a punch? You can see the difference in their design philosophies right away. I mean, just look at them. The Panzer IV is pure 1930s. It's just boxy. Its whole idea of protection was, hey, let's just bolt on thicker and thicker plates of steel. The Sherman, on the other hand, had a much more modern design. It used sloped armor, which is a brilliant way to increase the effective thickness and, hopefully make an incoming shell just bounce right off.
So let's put some numbers to this. The Panzer IV's front plate was a big, flat slab of steel, 80 millimeters thick. But look at the Sherman. Its plate was actually thinner, only 51 millimeters. The key, though, was that it was sloped at a really sharp angle, and that simple bit of geometry gave it an effective thickness of over 90 millimeters. So believe it or not, head on, the Sherman's hull actually had a bit of an edge.
But armor is about way more than just what's on the front, right? The Sherman got this absolutely deadly reputation for, well, as the crews said, brewing up too easily. It would just burst into flames. And the reason was because its ammunition was stored right behind this really thin side armor. So a hit to the side, it was just catastrophic. Now, they did eventually fix this with something called wet storage racks, but for the guys fighting in Normandy, this was a terrifying everyday reality. Okay, next up in our tale of the tape, firepower. Let's flip the script. We've seen how they take a hit, now let's see how well they could dish one out. Now, at first glance, it looks pretty even. Both tanks were rocking 75mm guns, but they were not created equal. See, the Sherman was designed from the get-go to have this gun. The Panzer IV, though, it actually started its life as an infantry support tank with a stubby little short-barreled gun. To keep it in the fight against other tanks, they had to upgun it with a much longer, much higher velocity weapon, a gun designed for one thing, killing other tanks. And man, that longer barrel made all the difference in the world. Just look at the stats here. It gave the Panzer's shells a way higher muzzle velocity. And what does that mean? Well, more velocity means more kinetic energy, which means it could punch through almost 100 millimeters of armor from 500 meters away. That is way more than the Sherman's gun could handle. So when it came to pure raw hitting power, yeah, the Panzer IV had a clear, undeniable advantage. Okay, agility and a human touch. Because a tank battle is never just a simple numbers game of who has the thickest armor or the biggest gun. Not at all. The ability to move, to react quickly, and, this is a big one, to see the enemy first is absolutely critical. And this right here perfectly shows a key advantage for the Sherman. Its turret had this electro-hydraulic power system, which meant it could whip around a full 360 degrees in just 15 seconds. The Panzer IV? It was relying on a much slower system, taking a whole 8 seconds longer. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but in the tight, close-quarters combat of Normandy, being able to get your gun on target first, That could be the literal difference between life and death. But the advantage swings right back to the Germans when we talk about the commander's job. The Panzer IV commander had this amazing cupola. It's like a little mini turret on top with 7 different vision blocks, giving him fantastic all-around awareness. The Sherman commander, though, he had just one single periscope. And to make matters worse, he was also the radio operator. Think about that. In the heat of battle, that is a huge, critical distraction. So, a battle in the bocage. We've looked at all the specs on paper, right? Now let's see how this all played out in a real, incredibly violent fight, the battle for a little village called Mouen on June 28, 1944. And you have to understand the terrain here. This was the Normandy bocage, and it was the defining feature of the whole campaign. I mean, you can forget about those wide-open tank battles you see in movies about the Eastern Front. This was a maze. Small fields, sunken lanes, and these incredibly thick, ancient hedgerows that could cut your line of sight down to just a few dozen meters. It was a defender's dream, really. A brutal, close-quarters brawl where getting the first shot off meant everything. So into this maze comes a small German force, just 5 Panzer IVs from the battle-weary 21st Panzer Division. They get the order to counterattack British positions near the village. Now, these crews were veterans. They knew what they were doing, but they were also facing the grim reality of just dwindling numbers. And coming to meet them, a much, much larger force. 16 British Sherman tanks. The German tankers were outnumbered more than 3-1. They knew a fight was coming, and they just had to brace for it. The fighting, as you can imagine, was absolutely brutal and at point-blank range. When the dust settled, all 5 of the German Panzer IVs were either destroyed or had to be abandoned. The Shermans, they lost 4 tanks. But, and this is the really crucial detail, because the Allies held the field at the end of the day, they could go in and recover 3 of their 4 knocked-out tanks. They could be repaired and sent right back into the fight. Those German losses, on the other hand, were permanent, gone for good. And this brings us to the War of the Factories. Because this small but really significant little victory, it points to the overarching factor that decided this whole duel, not just in one tiny field in France, but on a global scale. So what was the true deciding factor here? It wasn't just about who had the better gun or thicker armor. The battle between the Sherman and the Panzer IV, it wasn't won just by the brave crews in Normandy. It was also won by the thousands of workers in factories a whole ocean away. I mean, just look at these numbers. This right here tells the real story. Over the entire course of the war, Germany managed to produce about 8,500 Panzers, IVs. That's a lot, right? While the Allies, on the other hand, built nearly 50,000 Shermans. Just let that sink in. That's a staggering ratio. For every single Panzer IV that rolled off the line, the Allies could field almost 6 Shermans against it. And this all comes down to 2 totally different ways of thinking. German tanks, they were like works of art, products of incredibly skilled engineering, almost hand-built to these super exacting standards. They were excellent machines, no doubt about it, but they were also complex and really slow to produce. America? Well, America leveraged what it does best, industrial mass production. They were just churning out simple, reliable Shermans in absolutely colossal numbers. So this all leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? What matters more in a war, having the perfect weapon or just having enough of them? Let's go back to where we started. Who wins? Look, in a perfect one-on-one duel on a training ground, a veteran Panzer IV crew probably has the edge. But war is never, ever a clean one-on-one fight. It's messy, it's about attrition, it's about replacing your losses, it's about logistics. And in that war, the real war, the lesson of the M4 Sherman is crystal clear. Sometimes, quantity has a quality all its own.